Hi, and welcome to another podcast with Hanaz Writers Limited. My name's Charlotte, and I'm a Year 2 teacher. I've had experience working in a nursery for children who's aged 0 to 4 years old, and I currently work in a primary school, as a Year 2 teacher. If you haven't heard any of my podcasts before, then check them out on Hanaz Writers YouTube and Spotify channels. In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about how books can help to show us the important issues in our society, especially looking at the different times when books were written. I might also touch on how this can help writers when they are writing their own stories nowadays. To begin with, I'm just going to talk about stories that were written in the past. If you've ever done GCSEs or A-levels in the UK, then you've probably read books by Jane Austen, William Shakespeare, Charles Dickens, Charlotte Bronte, Mary Shelley, Scott Fitzgerald, and so on. So many different writers from maybe the 15th century up till now. And their books like Pride and Prejudice, Macbeth, A Christmas Carol, Jane F. Frankenstein for sure, and The Great Gatsby were all written at different times and different eras during the 18th century, 19th century, and the 20th centuries. And each of the books, they touch on a different theme, and they have different main characters. But the stories are still told in the way that the writer wants to tell them. And they're told in a beautiful and wonderful way. And each story holds the key facts and information that tells the reader about the life during those times and periods of time. For example, William Shakespeare was born in 1564 till 1616, and he wrote many plays. And his plays are stories based around the 17th century London, apart from Macbeth, which I think was the only play which he based in Scotland. Now, the language that he uses in his text, in his work, is Old English. And sometimes, yes, the words are difficult to understand in modern language. I'm sure lots of us were laughing at the different spellings and different words that were used. So, for example, take a moment to think of language that we are using nowadays in the 21st century. I think at that time, the old pub was spelt differently and it meant something different. We'd also use thy, thee, and them. And nowadays we use you, she, and so on. I'm sure that in the 21st century, there would be lots of new slang and new words nowadays that people may not understand. Think of what are the words that they're using? Slay, like fam. I think glow up is a new one as well. I imagine someone in 100 years' time, they're reading a book and someone's written a story and they've used these kind of slang words. Well, they'll be like, what is going on? So they probably have to take their time, read through the book and work out what exactly is going on in the story. Like, what do they mean by slay, by fam, and glow up? What do they even mean? Especially in the story, what is going on? Book Frankenstein was written in the 18th century, and this tells a story of a scientist, Dr. Frankenstein, who creates a monster and then brings it to life through the power of electricity. And the story touches on the differences between people and how they look in particular, and in how society treats others because of the way that they look. Well, the villagers become scared of Frankenstein's creature, and they decide that the best thing to do is to kill it. And they didn't take any time to understand the creature or why Dr. Frankenstein had created it in the first place and how it came to life. It's a fantastic and crazy thing to happen, really. He created a monster and then, boom, with some electricity, it came to life. How amazing is that? But because they saw something else, they saw something which was strange and weird and scary, they decided that this thing had to be killed before it did something bad to them. So they went on their prejudices and their fear of this creature without really getting to know or understand where it came from and how it came to be alive, why it was there. They just decided, actually, this thing is something different, something we don't know, so we have to kill it. It has to disappear. Another book which touches on society, and this one highlights the vast differences between the rich and the poor. So it's the rich and poor divide. This is Pride and Prejudice. Now, this book was written in the 19th century, and it tells the love story of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. But it definitely highlights throughout the whole book about the status of women and their life during this period of time. Women were expected to get married and have lots of children. Everyone just wanted to show how wonderful they lived their lives. They held balls and they showed off their rich living status. They pretended to be nobles and lords and ladies when they were just regular people who just happened to have a nicer job at that time. And they were a bit better off than most others. Imagine if you had to have a party every month just because your neighbours who lived maybe 20 miles away from you had just held a party last month, for example. And then you had to show off your house and your family and everyone who came to visit you just to show that you were doing well financially. It's kind of exhausting when you think about it. I think in the past, it used to be called keeping up with the Joneses. So, for example, if your neighbours ever got something new, you would then have to get something new just to prove that you were able to sustain that amount of financial stability. So, yeah, Pride and Prejudice, I don't think I would have been able to live during that time myself. I probably would have had a boring time, probably would have been so sick and tired of having a ball every few months or so and pretending that I was a rich person and living a lord or lady's life. If I wasn't that lucky to be a lord or lady, then I can't imagine the other side of it, where you have to live in squalor, basically. You have to live wherever you can, live off scraps of food from day to day, hoping that you get enough money to feed yourself. God forbid if you have a family and you don't get paid enough, especially as a man, if you work at just any kind of job and you don't get paid well, then you have a wife and children. Not a great life when you think about it. So it really highlights the differences from living in a well-off family or people who just have a really nicer job, to those of them who are the working class. Or even then, the lords and ladies didn't really have a job. They lived off riches of their family's inheritance. Even still, you had to be born into that wealth. So it's kind of like a fight, a struggle to live, to always marry into richer families, to always better yourself and be better than you were before. It's quite a lot to think about, really, when you think about it. So books, they have lots of different themes to them. It depends on the story and what the reader is reading. It depends on the theme of the story and what the book's about. But it also depends on what the writer wants to get across to the reader. So every time they write, writers have a voice. They have their own style of writing, their own certain way of doing things. However, say they want to write a story about the Wild Wild West, they have to adjust their writing. They have to suit it to the characters, the place that they're in, and also the year that they are writing the story in. So with the story in the Wild Wild West, they might have to use certain words and phrases like howdy ma'am when a man says hello to a lady, or darn as a swear word, or maybe y'all might be used, and so on and so forth. If you ever watched a Wild Wild West movie, then have a think about what's story has, like the settings of the story. For example, it might be in a dry desert with lots of horses or wild horses. They might have a local bar, of course, swinging doors so people can go in and out. People's clothes would definitely be different to today's standards anyway. So the writer really has to paint the picture, describe the people, describe the clothes, describe where they are in the world. Also can get into the reader's imagination. So all this description of the settings, showing the changes to people's speech and language, helps the readers to get into the time period. It's there for a reason, and it helps the readers to, say, imagine the characters better, imagine where they are in their own mind's eye. So what does this teach us about telling stories? Well, in this way, books can mention important historical issues as well in society. And through the stories, they can be used to tell us about what's happening, why, and also what people might be thinking during that time. Because when you read a story, you actually get to read the thoughts of the characters, which is something you don't get to do in a movie, unless of course the movie has the main character narrating their thoughts and feelings. But usually, most movies will have the characters on display, and the actor has to portray the different thoughts and feelings through their facial and body movements and expressions and things. So let's take, for example, apocalyptic stories. They're told to mainly highlight the fact that we're not taking care of the earth as well as we could be, for example. And writers can highlight the different issues in their books, get the readers to relate to different situations and scenarios through the eyes of the characters. So when a reader finds a good book, they invest in that character that they're reading about. They invest in them and their well-being and the situation and the events that are happening to the character. And they really care about them. They want to know what happens to them. They want to know if their character makes it out alive. What does the character do at the end of the story? For example, if the story is about racial discrimination and it's happening to the character, then the reader can better relate and understand reasons why it's happening because of what they've been reading about. And also what the writer has given to them as a backstory and information. They can't stop it from happening to the character because it's already been written in, but they can have empathy towards the character and feel something to what is happening to them. Let's take another example. If their character in the story is being bullied by another character, for example, the reader will feel like they want to help them and stop the bullying. This could help the reader in real life situations, in case they ever see bullying them and see it happening in front of them. Then they can stop and think, what can I do right now at this moment in time? How can I stop this? What is going on? And they can relate it to what they've read in the book. Say, oh my gosh, this happened to my favorite character in this book. And the character in the story did this. So maybe if I do that as well, and then the thought processes go on and on. So, it's something that they can read about. And even if they've never had to encounter it themselves, if they see it happening to someone else, then they can relate to it and they can understand a bit more what's happening and maybe help out if they can. So books in this sense are amazing. They can really help the readers to think about the issues in today's day and age. Then they can ask themselves, oh, what can I do in future to help if I ever see something that should not be happening? So what could I do to help out? Another good thing about books is that readers can just take their time to read through pages, take their time to read the chapters, read the events, and really just process it themselves. They can take a stock of how the characters are reacting to what's happening, and they can appreciate the author's writing with their thoughts and ideas. It does have a very different effect to a movie because the reader can read the story, they can imagine what's happening in their own minds, and they can kind of make up what the characters look like, how they sound, and what's happening. Sometimes all you need is your own imagination to bring a good book to life. You won't need a movie to watch what is happening. Well, let me know what you think. Are books able to highlight relevant topics in society? And another question, is it important for writers to continue highlighting these relevant issues in their writing for their audiences? So let me know, leave any comments below, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this podcast. If you want to listen to any more, then follow, like, and subscribe Hanaz Writers Limited podcasts. We also have a channel on Spotify, if you'd rather listen on there. Listen on YouTube. And also they have an Instagram, hanaz.writers. So have a look. I'll be making a few more podcasts soon. Thank you for listening. And until next time, bye.